I was explaining why I'm hosting this event, the future of the world post generative AI. So when I came here last year, my plan was to be here a few months and move back to New York. I was living in Europe, and before that I was in New York, so I wanted to go there. And then it's like generative AI hit, and I'm like, oh, very interesting. It's a good time. Let's see what happens. One of the famous waves in Silicon Valley. I want to be part of it. And then what I saw is like wave after wave of type of generative AI startups that were coming, and it was like I would think about it, I would go to a few pitches, like these are all going to fail. Like the business model fundamentally is wrong. The idea is wrong. And then what I've noticed is like, we are so in the middle of, every new breakthrough that rarely we have a minute to sit down and think about it. Like, what does these change mean? Like, where are we going? What would it be like in 6 months? What potential advancements would happen, or what would work or would not? So this talk series is focusing on that topic. I have had events before on about, what is the future of startups? How are they going to be impacted by generative AI, the way we build the startups? And then how would VC model change, if the startups are built differently? And then today we are talking about a new wave, The first wave was these rappers, and they were raising billions of dollars early last year, if you remember. And then I'm like, they are not going to work. This is just insanity, because when VC invest in a startup, the idea is that this startup is going to reach $1 billion market. And then even if the startups do reach $1 billion market, all they have have de-risked that environment for OpenAI, because the startups don't own the IP. They're building on somebody else's IP. So it's like, why investors are, pouring so much money. And the next wave immediately after were all these foundational models. And I'm like, I think it's a little early. Maybe foundational models is going to be hot in a year or two, because right now everybody's after the biggest and largest, and let's push it, and let's see where we're going to go. And we are going to go towards a singularity. And then when we reach it, that very few companies have the entire IP and all these things and own it, and nobody can compete with them. People will freak out, the amount of information they have and can process. And then we would be more interested having our own small, very smart, very fast, very efficient edge models on our own devices that, keep our information and we don't have to share. And, I still have an opinion in the next 6 to 12 months that race will start slowly. And now we are in the midst of the agent battle, right? Like agent as a service. The wave of the startups and generative AI that I see, they're all, trying to build agent as a service, and then, go to enterprise or, offer a B2C. And at the same time, I have been observing a lot of people building really, really cool agents for their own day-to-day use. One example I use that Hadi is the guy, my friend, who actually we had a few sessions on how to build your own agent here. And we are thinking about maybe creating a curriculum for people who want to learn on how to do it. So one of the most amazing agents he built for his own use as a founder was, before revealing it, let me ask a couple of questions. Who is a founder here, or has been a founder before? Who has raised funds or has a pitch trying to raise? Who enjoyed doing market research? Okay, I hated it. It's always like, you don't know the source of information. If you want good information, is expensive. And it's just like, you only do it when you have to fundraise, especially, when you're early stage startup. And what he did, he created these agents on Perplexity. So every Monday morning, he had an agent per competitor. It would go and do research and see what did the competitor do last week. Did they raise new round of funding, or a new hire or fire or new scientific paper or anything in the news per competitor. There was another agent, is there a new competitor in the market? Did anybody make an announcement? And then every Monday morning, he would have like a brand new market research, 100% accurate on his desk, at least according to information on the web. So these are the type of agents that I believe, going back to what is going to happen to the startups, I think the biggest impact that generative AI going to leave, this is my absolute strong opinion, and I love you to challenge, because, I'm constantly refining this theory or thesis that I have, is that actually the biggest impact of generative AI is not going to be generative AI product. It's going to be for companies and people who use generative AI as a tool to build whatever they're building. It doesn't even have to be AI. And if you think about it, it's actually very straightforward. Think about cloud. When cloud computing came, a few big companies took over the infrastructure and owned the IP, and maybe one or two companies we had, like Hugging Face and the like, that really made big name, but not that many. But majority of billions and billions of dollars in value generated was by companies that used cloud computing as a tool to build whatever they wanted to. So they didn't use cloud computing as their IP, they built their IP on top of it. And I see that exact same thing happening here, because now startups, I have this thesis of 3 founder unicorns where super smart founders come together and they automate their operations as much as possible. So they can build real quick. They don't need to hire. They don't need to raise a lot of money. So they can really, instead of wasting so much time on that, really focus on building, and they really build quick. And they're kind of changing the landscape of how startups are built. And the last line, as a result, so when, right now, today, unicorns, what are they? It takes 5 to 10 years, it takes 100 to 250 million raised, and it takes hundreds of people. But pretty soon we're gonna have unicorns that are a handful of people. Maybe they raised 5 million, maybe 15 million, if that. And they're gonna create that value in 2 years. And until a month ago, I would say, it's not gonna happen to hardware. Hardware is so much harder, and I see hardware companies doing it, like, which my own mind is blown. I was not expecting that. So with all that said, I hope I explained a little bit of why I do this, because I'm obsessed about, let's think about this, to practice in critical thinking. And, I love to hear any probable scenario you guys have in mind, even if it's not very likely, but, what do you think? And then we're going to have a little bit of conversation, and then we're going to open up. So we're going to have, I hope, engaging conversation. I love to hear from you. With all that said, we have Ravi here. I'm very, very pleased that you joined us, and why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's super exciting. First of all, I think everyone could spend a Thursday night somewhere else, so I'm glad you chose to come here. So thank you for that. I'm a founder. I run a startup that's in the agent space. We have a SDK, a framework for developers to go build applications that are integrated and connected and intelligent, and that's all powered by a agentic framework. So that's what I do on a day-to-day basis. I also started a small community of builders. It's called Building AI Agents with some friends. Hari is here, Luis is here. And the whole idea of that is to bring together builders that, share ideas, share learnings, and figure out all of this together, right? So it's not, because it was still early, and as much as Sarah saying it's going to change very quickly, which is very right, it's still at an early stage of development. So that's what I do outside of my day job, and a bunch of people from the community are here. Some of the startups that are actually demoing today come to our events. So I encourage you guys to all come for those. And we typically do that twice a month, and once in the city, once in the South Bay. So that's me, and that's the advertisement and the commercial. So I'll start there. I'm really just picking up a little bit on what you're saying. The pace of change is really quick. Everyone knows that. I still think we're quite early in the stage of evolution of agents. And whether that's in terms of personal productivity or for enterprises. And there's a lot of work to be done. And that's got to do, some of it to do with how people are building them, but also a lot to do with the infrastructure around it. The idea of trust and how do you really trust, these new way of software is going to be very important. And I think that's a huge topic, which has lots of different components. Trusting the actual programs, trusting the actual people using them, privacy, security. So I think there's a lot of things to be solved, and it will happen. I just think that there's significant things that people are working very actively on, right? So everyone from research organizations to technologies to builders and founders. In fact, some of you went to the Stanford HAI event, which was last week. There are really incredible amounts of research being done in this area of human interaction with computers. And so I think there's a lot of things to be discovered, and it's a super exciting time, and I'm really excited about that.
Okay, so today's conversation is going to be about agents. So what is an agent?
It's funny because every event you go to, that's the very first question people ask you. What are you building, and what is an agent? So there's agents. It's very simplistically, it's a program that can enable you to complete a task and an action autonomously. So not necessarily requiring a human in the loop. Now that's a very simple definition of it. What it's not is, people typically call zero-shot prompting, which is, there's a simple question being asked and a response. So it's really a way for you to be able to complete actions with agency.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I think about it. And that's what I think most people are searching around that. Yeah.
I like that definition. But for me to understand, I always understand by analogy. And then, when startups are spinning off, it's like, that's kind of like having a smart ass friend that whatever you ask them, it's like, what is this picture?
We all love those, right?
And then we have one that is like, about everything. So what rappers would do is just like a page or two of prompts that like focusing what to say, edge cases, blah, blah, blah. But then ultimately the information comes from the big, large language models that it built on. And the analogy for agents, the way I understand it, I want to know what do you think is, when has anybody ever like at least browsed or was on Fiverr? Is it Fiverr? You contract, yeah. So agents are like having someone with a very particular expertise that you hire for a very limited scope of tasks. Like think about the $5, $20 kind of project. So you know exactly what they're good at, and they know exactly how to do it. So it's literally kind of outsourcing, and kind of like the first version of AGI, like touching upon that, the general artificial intelligence is going to be having like a very, very capable executive assistant that can make so many decisions and then organize and plan, and then you're like hopefully CEO of like a big company, and then you really rely on them, managing everything. So that's kind of like the type of levels of kind of parallel analogy. It helps me understand. So does anybody disagree? Does anybody have a better or different definition of what agents are?
Well, there's another variation on this. It's like I think in the we were saying autonomous, for example, and I think about agents work with people, for example. So they actually drive a person through a set of things because I want to hurt the person actually.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So when I say he thinks about when I mentioned being autonomous, he thinks of it as more as agents working with people. And that's very true in the sense when I say, I guess there's always going to be a range of what we call agents, right? So there's also debate about what is an agent, what is not. So doesn't it mean that you have to be completely autonomous for it to be an agent? So there's degrees of, probabilistic things to, deterministic. So that's a wide range.
It's inspection somewhere, right?
And so therefore you have to have, so it could be either one. And I think we're sort of somewhere in the middle is where people should be, because there's human in the loop, there's trust involved. And I think eventually you'll see a lot more things being automated. But we're clearly not there yet. But if I agree, it's not just about machines.
And also another very like high level distinction is usually the wrapper technology is built on top of one LLM, and agents are, could be using different versions of, or, several different connections to the same LLM, or like GPT 3.5 plus 4 plus 4, or, some, OpenAI LLMs, and also Perplexity or something. So it depends, there's like divide and conquer, and each of them, what the agents do, simply said, is like they understand how to break down simple tasks that is predefined and how to complete it and give you a meaningful output. So it's not just the text, it could be a document, it could be graph, it could be anything like that. And with that said, the next question is like, how do you see agents impacting the world? What is their place? What are they good at? What should we look forward to?
Wow, that's I mean, it's like you started with a very simple example. You said, companies used to take millions of dollars to build. And I mean, if all of that capital deployed in building software companies was all about really smart engineers, for the most part, right? Because you had, especially in the Bay Area and the East Coast, that cost is actually going to go down significantly. So to your point, the way companies are going to be built is just one example of how it's going to impact it. Is dramatically going to change. And I think that's huge. Right? And, so that's more of a commercial view of the world that we live in software. The part that really is interesting to me is really how does this really improve our lifestyles, our health, humankind in terms of benefit to larger society. And I think that will be the most visceral impact of AI and agents. And I'm hoping that happens sooner. There's a lot of a lot of room for agents and AI to be able to impact the world in ways that are not necessarily commercial. Right?
Yeah, so sometimes when I watch like a really good sci-fi movie and like I like try to analyze the scene they set and then how humanity works, I'm like, how did they think of it? Like it's like interesting, it's kind of hopefully a good one is plausible, even usually utopian, dystopian, not utopian. So if you want to like make a sci-fi movie actually about 6 months to 12 months from now, what subtle or very obvious things have changed? Like, what is ahead of us? What are we going to see that, what is expected? What is the future of the world post-generative AI in 6 months?
6 months.
Or a year?
Lots of things. Okay, well, I mean, are you talking about a specific sci-fi movie? We should get some movie fans here to answer that question. No, I mean, look, I think there's going to be rapid advances in the underlying models. That's going to really help agents and this autonomous change to bring about significant impact. So there's a lot of constraints. One of the constraints is really the models are not quite there yet. They're changing quickly, they're improving quickly. And so therefore, you need fundamentally the reasoning capabilities of the underlying models to change and to improve. So that's going to be a very specific example of something that's going to increase the pace of innovation with regards to how agents work.
So,
but I don't know if that'll help you make that a science fiction.
I don't know, like if you want to show like a clip of like 12 months from now, please.
Can give a crazy idea.
Can you speak louder?
Yeah, I can give a very crazy idea, if you don't mind. We all know from history there was a thing called Babylonian Tower, which like was built by a lot of people, and then God or whatever it is decided to give everybody different languages and divided people. Now, language is the fundamental thing that lets us talk to agents and ask them. We want our big dream is give a very small command and them to magically understand everything we want them to do. So in a sense, they have to figure out the rest of the context that is hidden in our words. So what's going to happen, maybe not in half of a year, maybe not in a year, but the next few years, people and agents, and not maybe agents, maybe assistants, more like more complex entity, they will form internal language between person and their assistant. So that assistant would be able to quickly grasp what their user wants to get things done. And that in a way was going to create a new Babylon Tower between people and agents and between each other. But at the same time, because models themselves, agents themselves are grounded on models and models are grounded on human knowledge, there's going to be sort of also a bridge between those two things.
Very interesting. So, kind of along the line of what I imagine, one is, what would be the UI, like user interface? Like, do we need UI anymore?
Of course, very simple thing. Most of the information we receive is through visual channel, not from audio channel. When we see visual information, we can very quickly recall what we have seen before. But when we use voice channel, we have a very limited amount of data we can keep in our mind before we'll forget about it. Even right now, you ask me something, I will forget by the end of the question, my answer, what you asked me to do. Don't get me wrong, that's the way how our brains work, they limited. So of course, visual channel is huge. Of course, it's going to happen. Probably the biggest thing that we can dream about is that user interface is going to create on the fly, but we already have seen that like a year ago and half a year ago.
So
So
what do you think?
Yeah, I think the dominant.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Be feel free to jump in here. I think the dominant interface today is chat, is a text and chat, right? I think that's going to change. It's voice is one aspect that everyone's exploring, just given all the improvements we're seeing now, right? With all the demos that you're seeing, right? I don't know if it'll be something different. You've seen these other instruments that have come out, that the Rabbit, etc., which is another form factor, not quite hit the mark yet. But it just can't be chat. This can't be. There's.
I strongly believe it's going to be a lot of conversation. It would be really that's a newer release on GPT app. For majority of the things.
It's going to be voice instead of visual, and
yeah,
it's.
I was
Anyone
gonna say,
else?
just taking your thought a little bit further and taking Sarah's point. Effectively, it's gonna devolve into your digital twin. Who's probably gonna do a lot
Yeah.
of thinking for you. So actually you just might be doing whatever you're gonna do, and then your digital twin is gonna go off and do it for you because it's already learned all, your knowledge and all your experience and all your capabilities. So in that case, maybe you won't even much interact with your agent because it will be really autonomous.
Yeah, so very interesting. Going back to the topic of this session, who owns the future, agent as a service or self-made agents. This event couldn't be more timely because this week Apple announced Apple Intelligence, which technically is, implementing ChatGPT in the iOS. So very smart interaction. And before that, the naming, I'm like, maybe I should have named it differently now, was agent as a service. All these companies are building amazing agents. I put this out there to be challenged. Again, gonna have a very short runway because all the new models released are gonna be agent based. And then, why would I pay for agent as a service? Where I can literally talk to, the way we were chatting with ChatGPT before, and then training it and creating our custom GPTs, and then not talking to it. The next release that they don't want to call it GPT-5, I don't know what they want to call
Well,
it.
one reason might be that a model will have these agents and things work for just that model, right? And so people don't want to be stuck with a model and everything to do with what that provides. You want to be able to have plurality in being able to leverage different things.
But is that agent as a service or AI as a service or LLM as a service? Do you mean we're gonna have our own models for doing different things, or?
Well, the way I thought about your question was, why would you pay for something that's already in the model itself?
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah,
what you're asking for? So yeah, the model providers are going to provide things just like we saw in the cloud. Every cloud provider has a certain set of things that they're going to provide. And then the question is, how are you going to leverage? Do you want to be locked into any one particular model, or do you want options? And that's kind of how it's thinking.
I think
Go ahead.
the products that will sit on top of these models, right, are going to do certain things that are specific to the particular persona or user. Now that ChatGPT or whatever, GPT-7 may not necessarily be, first of all, they may not be interested in doing that. And two, the model needs context. So these products, agent products, will provide the necessary context for that agentic behavior to come to fruition, Otherwise, it'll be hard to make it work.
Yeah, actually following exactly what I said is one of the models Sam Altman had a while ago saying that you have your model below, your foundation models below. And then sitting on top of that is your new version of business logic, which has all this agent programming. And that'll actually drive it across. And then the cool thing about that is that can sit on top of multiple models.
Yeah.
So you can hop on and do what you like.
So,
Yeah, to me, the interesting part that we're just getting into is beyond just the model layer and all the picks and troubles, and the things that are going to be built from that onto the application. And for that to be, like you said, they need to have intelligence, they need to have context, they need to have optionality, they need to have a lot of different things. And I think a lot of people are building, some of the faces I know here are building in that space, right? We're not really attacking the underlying model infrastructure, because that's people who have raised lots of money, and that's what they should be doing. But the real interesting part is really what's happening above those layers. And there's a lot of room for work there. There's a wide spaces there.
can you, yeah.
Yeah, so then there you have things that, okay, so if I had to categorize what are these agents and picks and shovels, just in the agent sort of stack, you have, people who are building personal assistants, right? So there are things that make your life good, easier day to day. You have specific verticalized or functional things, so sales and marketing, you might have HR, you may have other kinds of applications. And then you'll have more of a, I would say, what do you call it, as a framework or an infrastructure meaning tooling that helps you build, developers to go build things, right? It could be a framework, it could be a framework that's hosted. So developer tools. And so that's sort of three large, but there's also different ways to look at these. I think I just kind of simplified to there's tooling, there's specialized agents, i.e. either functional, could be HR, could be finance, etc., or it could be verticalized ones. So these verticalized ones, like Harvey is the most easiest example that everyone's heard of, but there's a lot of healthcare specific ones. et cetera, right? So those are the wide spaces with lots of unexplored TAMs that I think investors and builders are very active.
Can you give us like one example potential product that gonna come to market in healthcare or whatever field and is gonna, be
Yeah.
agent as a service?
Yeah, I mean,
and then-
first of all, I think every application is going to have some level of agentic capabilities in it. And we talk about it today, but it'll just be something that we assume to be part of an application. And the reason is, the way applications were built are going to be built or are being built. The building blocks for those are fundamentally different from how it's been in the past. And that starts everything from the LLM to how those building blocks are put together. And those layers are, being rewritten, right? And so, if you look at the enterprise, that's one way to think about it. Like, how do they build applications? And so, these developer toolkits, today enterprises want to be able to build things themselves. They want to have things that have control over things. And they want to go build things. And so they're building applications for, again, it could be legal applications. It could be finance, HR applications. All of that to automate things in the enterprise that are extremely manual.
Legal applications, since early last year, a lot of, wrappers have started and then, everything. So what would these legal applications built have? That is, their IP. What is it that they own that nobody else can replicate, or what is the moat?
Well, okay. So any legal specialists here who can maybe answer the question? Go for it.
I'm not gonna, if you don't mind, thank you very much.
And I like everybody else, please do share.
Sure. In one of our conversations with the company that we're working with, we realized that one of the biggest challenges is to understand multiple contracts and multiple laws, multiple regulations that affect the way how the business process works. And when you think about this, you realize that virtual augmented generation doesn't cut. The model ability, it doesn't cut. And when you grab a normal model, which has like 428,000 tokens, context window doesn't cut. When you go to any kind of technology that increases the context window, you're usually quickly losing the model's ability to reason. We actually created a benchmark called Babylon that allows us to measure reasoning capability of the models like Gemini, OpenAI models, Mistral, and so on. The answer, I think, is in our ability to enable models and agents that are powered by these models to collect data from different pieces, do it very efficiently, reason upon them, and come to a conclusion that is very, very high quality about all of those regulations that allow you to make a decision where you should do or not should do some particular task. And that is super hard to do because in effect, it's not one agent, it's like a team of agents. One every time you make one more decision, you increase the chance of error. So when you have a team of agents working together, trying to solve that particular problem, there's multiple data sources, you have such a high magnitude of error that you are facing that it's undesirable to use it. So someone who can crack that, they're going to win.
Well, I mean, one thing that I usually say to this is, some people are proponents of like, oh, we have to automate everything and now we can do it. And some people it's like, no, we can't trust them. We shouldn't, there's a margin of error. You can't do it. But the truth is there's no black and white. It's always a spectrum. So like, I'm not excited about like a super 100% automated world yet, but it's about how much of the work could you automate and how much of it you need my, human critical thinking or creativity. That creativity, I think, is one of the toughest areas for AI to hit because by default, at least the current models is they just can do whatever they have seen. And then they're not creative, but, so what? Yes, human beings, when you assign a task, they make error. The best of us make error. And then, but if you have a human being who is engaged and, follows through and oversees, again, we have that kind of management anyways. However, with that said, I also challenge what I said is unfortunately a lot of people who are working with GPTs now, like they just get, they work with it a couple of times, they get excited and slowly, stop checking and just take it as a fact. And that's the dangerous part. But I saw some hands back there who, Jason. Can you come up so people online?
The moat in a lot of these disciplines, particularly ones that are kind of professional bodies, are going to be when precedent is set. So if somebody sets a precedent on making a legal decision, for example, using illegal AI, that's a huge moat. People are doing so in clinical trials right now. So when the FDA starts accepting, they start accepting models and workflows that are designed by agents, that's a huge moat.
So the FDA is accepting right now.
It is, no, not yet.
Okay.
But there are people very much on the front edge that are trying to make that change. And the first people that do will have a huge advantage in basically all of that side of drug development. So for a lot of these things, it's going to be when like professional bodies start making decisions or accepting things, that's going to be the moat that people have in those areas. It's not for consumer and things like that, but in certain verticals that will exist. It'll exist in law, it'll exist in drug development, it'll exist in medicine.
Okay, so let's actually
Maybe other-
tie back to the conversation. So the conversation is how agents gonna impact the future, what part of the life, and how would it be like? One of the thing is, I think it's gonna be a lot of conversational. To your point, yes, we need to see, but majority of the thing, if Ravi and I want to set up a meeting, I don't need to see my calendar. I don't need to go to Google search to find like a coffee shop. We do it as a bug, there's no other way. So far, there was no other way. But now even, at least the Apple AI claims that, it's like, set up a meeting with Ravi and then maybe we have some shared agreement of like some sort of calendar share. I know where he is. I know.
Maybe we've met before at this one coffee shop and it just.
Exactly. It's like, that Ravi's agent knows, well, like in the afternoon, Ravi prefers coffee or juice, jumbo juice or whatever. And then, where am I gonna be before and after? And then, find somewhere, So we don't need to do any of that, and auto-magically, the calendar invite appears on our calendar. And, to some point, some people with Alexa, it's just like even in the morning reminds them of meetings they have. I don't have that memory. I have to check my calendar. Maybe for that, I need to then have a UI.
So I have a question, yes, so go ahead.
Oh, no, I was,
I was just gonna ask you, are you comfortable, how many people here are comfortable giving their calendars, web browser, or access to an AI? Everyone?
Who's not comfortable?
Oh, no one's gonna put their hand.
The hand back there.
Let's go back to the first question. Who's comfortable? All right, so there's a fair number of people who are not.
Word.
Oh, yeah, that this is the issue of trust, right? Which
Yeah.
is,
So,
part of, yeah.
I was agreeing with Sarah, and then I think that the next step is basically personal assistants talking to you on your phone. I have a friend that got super excited when he figured out he could talk with GPT 4.0, but I've been talking with GPT 4 for a while on the phone, and I think as more and more people come to this realization they can talk with it, and they can aggregate their information and do things like there's a meeting coming up. Like I got a text message today about a meeting coming up for tomorrow to remind me, and an email. And I'm kind of glad there was, because I might have forgotten. But I think generally people would love to have something remind them about the simple daily tasks so they don't make those mistakes.
yeah, please.
I want to share something. I have a nephew. He started Fanbase. I have a nephew who started Fanbase. They got 20 million from his, I think at one time. So Fanbase is for influencers to monetize. And so he got his people to use ChatGPT and generate automatically for the influencer. That is, the feeds come in, this is the summary, and we propose this answer to blast out. So he offered that feature. So at first the influencers say, what the hell is this, right? And then they explained it, and lo and behold, the influencers started to use that and they loved it. Okay, there you go.
So that's kind of like a digital twin thing that.
I want to say the negative news, because we've all been talking about positive.
We need someone negative, go for it.
So there is a person who committed suicide because he was talking to a chat. He was talking to a chat assistant. The name of the chat assistant is Chai, CHAI, Chai AI.
Yep.
This was in Berlin or Belgium. So he committed suicide because he was lonely and he was talking to the ChatGPT, and then I don't know what happened, but he committed suicide. So I understand that all of us want to trust our calendars to AI and try to get rid of the mundane tasks, but we also want to eliminate the possibility of we driving into under the like off the bridge because things had turned right and we turned right and we went into the bridge from the bridge into the water. So
Yep, thank you for sharing that. So what I would, are there people online who have questions? Oh, do you want to say something, Kai?
Thank you. I wouldn't say that, that is very unfortunate that that happened. But I don't think that AI is evil in any capacity or will ever be evil. This has just been a bunch of propaganda and terrorism that was spread in movies in the 90s. And mathematically speaking, AIs will always do what they're told. So the AIs themselves are just like, they're just like a desk.
I disagree.
They're like a desk. This desk is not gonna do anything unless you
disagree.
move it.
Like, but maybe so far, but when we have like super intelligence, AGI, whatever we want to call it, the criteria for calling that is autonomy, so they can make decision. So far, every tool, everything we had, guns don't kill people, people kill people, is like, because that tool was not autonomous, couldn't make a decision. But when AI reaches the point that has autonomy, this argument I don't think does apply anymore. And human being, we are so proud of our morality and we have so many people who do not abide. And why would we expect AI would? So I don't know. Anybody else has any opinion on that?
I got a fun example. There was a military one they did. And I forget the example, but basically it said, you need to go attack the enemy and blow them up or whatever it was. And so it went off and did that. And at some point, that's the primary goal, of course. At some point, the operator said, no, come back now. And it's all crap. You're ruining my mission. So it went back and killed the human, of course. And they said, no, we can't do that. And they started doing all these things to game around it. So when you start making your goal not aligned with all the other, other things that could happen, then you get results like that.
But I wanted to actually wrap that, Kai, like, do you agree or disagree with me? Like, I disagree with you. You're more than welcome to disagree with me back.
You want him to tell you what he really thinks? You told him back.
Don't embarrass me too much. A little bit is okay.
I'm gonna be honest, AIs right now just do what they're told. So
Yeah.
even if they do some things on their own autonomy in the future, that is,
So even if they do something in the future that like we believe they're autonomous, they were still made autonomous by humans with good or bad intentions. Now they even if like let's say you're like strolling a car and you just leave it going, and it hits someone, you left it going and it just kept going. It's not like the car was conscious and did anything, because these AIs will never be what we fully deem as conscious. They're just looking at patterns and then manipulating these patterns to give you a response to the pattern that you gave it as an input.
But to back up Sarah, you can make them autonomously bad, right?
Yeah,
But
So,
then
like-
Kai's point still applies, that like they do what you ask them to do.
That's not true. That's exactly.
The problem are humans. Humans are the problem.
No, it's not that, because the models are statistically measured. So it's not like a software where exactly you can compute the output behavior, but it's not, because it's statistical. So that means that you have to prove that all the possible keys are covered, which cannot be done because it's statistical. So that means that somewhere you could pick up the model, such a behavior, somebody introduced a model, for example, scrapping a web and introduce things like on the source side behavior, right? So those things you pick up and you couldn't prove that.
Yeah.
So you could possibly introduce, when you rely on that, you could never rely on that model. That's, I just want to say.
Yeah, in the back, anybody wants to share anything?
Hi, my name is Simon. I wanted to add one point, we're people, so we're mostly, look at this from, anthropocentric point of view. But if agents are going to be autonomous, even if they are very dumb as they are now, they eventually will start talking to each other, which will kind of address your point about, making errors. One way to fix errors is just talk to an environment and figure out, how to, get better feedback. Which means, first your calendar talks to your email, then maybe your refrigerator talks to your washing machine, then maybe your car talks to a hydrant. And that's a very interesting world. When things are happening like without us even understanding, so they will develop their own languages and ecosystems. I'm just curious if people thought about this.
Hi, I agree with you. Right now, we are in the weak AI phase, so that's why AI is like a nest. They will do what you is told to do, right? But we're approaching AGI phase in the near future, and so that's why Elon Musk has been saying this, has been warning us about the nature of AI for a long time. Like 10 years ago, he has been saying that. And then on OpenAI, they have alignment team, and they have a lot of people. This internal disagreement within the team, so that's why there are a lot of people, internal people who have been leaving, right? So because of this, of the misalignment, the disagreement within the alignment team, so the nature of AI is real, and we have to address it. We have to discuss and put in potential checkpoint in order to let prevent AI from doing dangerous things.
I like that. Good viewpoints. Yeah.
Ravi, what do you think?
No, I do think that, look, I think there's the AI part of it, and then there's a human part of it. And this goes back to my interaction of how do humans interact with these machines. And the intent of the human is always going to supersede, to your point, what the technology can do. But I do think in this case, you made the point that the underlying technology itself is very powerful, is going to become powerful enough where, regardless of what the intent of the human input, what it might not contextualize it the right way. And so that there is a big part of safety that the underlying technology needs to take care of by itself, regardless of whether the human uses it for good or bad, right? And I think that's what everyone's talking about and working on. So I don't think that it's just about what humans can do and can't do in this case, but typically would be the case before we got to any sort of sentient technology.
Okay, so far, our conversation was supposed to be 45 minutes, so we are exactly on time. But what we have been doing is like in design thinking, we have been expanding, so we haven't made a conclusion. So we're gonna have the demos, and after the demos, they're gonna be about 20-30 minutes. We're gonna continue the conversation after we see actually what people are building. I think would be interesting, and wrap it up. I have one question. If you, I'm gonna ask the question. I posted it on LinkedIn a couple of days ago. I'm like, my mind is stuck on it. And then, if you don't want to talk about it, raise your hand. If people want to talk about it, we can talk about it. The question is, going back to AGI, like, we're gonna build this super intelligent, and we are debating if it's safe or not safe. Is it gonna be evil or not evil, right? The question is, when would we know that we have reached AGI? And here's my caveat. Allegedly, we're going to say we're going to create a super intelligence that's more intelligent than every human being. And if that's the fact, number one, are we even able to measure an intelligence, more intelligence than us? How are we going to do it? Like, is it even possible philosophically?
I think Sam will let you know.
No, but like seriously, how is it even possible to measure intelligence of a being more intelligent than you? Number two, even if that was possible, somebody said this like really good, I got a kick. He's like, please stop posting these videos of testing in humanoid robots by kicking them, because they're gonna be trained on that information, and they realize like kicking is actually a good thing, don't do it. But then also, like these new models that are gonna be trained, like they're gonna read all this information about like, pessimists and people who are a little afraid of it. And what if they, they're already really good at manipulation, right? Your point is like, they're really, really good at it, insanely good at it. And like, what if, they pick up the signal that I should not ever signal to a human being how smart I am?
I mean, you watch the patterns of energy consumption. The energy consumption.
What if they can really optimize it and like, I don't know, like,
the most important thing is the moment when the models, I mean, when the AI will do something that we didn't ask it to do, that will be the moment. It's very obvious, I know, but think of it. Everything we
Well,
build
that's happening
today.
every day, so like,
Huh?
that's happening every day. You're asking him to do something, he's doing something.
No.
But you're talking about that.
No, there is a huge distinction between the fact that we ask the system to do one thing and it does another thing, and the moment when we don't ask the system to do anything at all,
Oh, I see.
and yet there is a trigger inside the system that wasn't created by us, but was created by it, that started the whole process, and that will be the moment when we will find the difference.
That's a good point.
One more thing I want to add, and I want to hear a couple of opinions on that, is the truth is every new model released, we don't even know what its capability is. You know, we test it and we find out, and later on we figure it out. So it's not like, you know, ChatGPT releases a like new model with this like, oh, these are the 20 new things they can do. Like, yeah, they have some ideas, but more and more we find out more what they can do. And then again, to your point of energy consumption or to your point of them triggering, we are saying every, you know, a 12-year-old, when you want to, you know, tell them, you know, I want to measure your intelligence, and if you're more intelligent than this, you're going to be dead. I'm going to pull the plug on you, is going to play dumb. Like, why do we think if we're going to create a super intelligence who can't figure this out, that it shouldn't show its intelligence to us? Anybody else? Like, hold on, like,
I know. Sorry.
So if I understood it correctly, the original motivation behind starting OpenAI was also that if you start building AGI sooner, then the rate of progress will be slower over time. Because as you see, like the amount of compute we have is increasing year by year. So the later you develop the technology and algorithms on top of it, then the sooner the AGI is going to happen. Whereas if you start sooner, then it takes slower and you have more time to adjust. And that was also one of the motivations to start working on AGI. And now people mistrust OpenAI's ability to stop if the case happens. That we have AGI. But yeah, it's a really hard discussion, and the goalposts keep changing. Like what we defined as the Turing test and consciousness 10 years ago, we kind of got there today, but we don't agree that it's conscious or human yet. So yeah.
Anybody else wants to share something on the back?
I think that the moment that it is able to do to the test that he posed over there, they do something that you haven't prompted them to do. At that point, we should just assume, I think it's smarter than us, because the scale between the dumbest human and the smartest human is not probably as many orders of magnitude as between where it is now and where it will be at that point. So once the point that it can think like the dumbest human, its ability to train itself to be smarter is going to have it scale the kind of range of human intelligence much quicker than it has scaled the amount of intelligence it needed to get to that point.
So like the slightest autonomy is like a free fall, like.
I think at that point, it's basically like you've crossed the Rubicon, and at that point it can level up to being smarter than us. Whether it can make jumps above that, like quantum jumps, I think is probably an open question.
Well, one other question is, do you think we would not learn enough along the way for that not to happen? So today we think that it's going to be a massive jump, but I think we're going to see incremental improvements before we get there. I think through that process, we will also learn how to control these things, how to check for what it's going to do.
But if it ever gets to the point that it can take an action that we don't prompt it to do, that initial action could be teach myself something.
Right.
And that's like kind of binary 0 to 1, because right now it can't feed data into itself. It can't make any agentic decision. But the moment you can make an agentic decision that is a positive increment, and you iterate that over the number of decisions it can make per second, it can take the fact that it goes from 0 to epsilon, iterate 1 plus epsilon to the, I don't know, 10 quintillion amount over the course of a day or something like that. And it can make jumps that we couldn't conceive of now. So I think the meaningful jump is, can it go from adding epsilon to its own intelligence to 0? And right now it's 0. And if it ever gets to epsilon, then we should just take that as a sign that it is going to raise that to whatever power.
I think what you are looking for when you're describing is the ability for AIs to train on AI generated data in like kind of like a never ending perpetual loop. So there was a very interesting paper that came out 2 years ago, or maybe a year and a half ago by Anthropic called constitutional AI, where they essentially, they don't even train an AI anymore on human generated data. They train AIs now on AI generated data in kind of like this never ending cycle of intelligence explosions. So you have one agent that just generates a bunch of data, then you train that, you train another agent on that data, and then the new agent will create the training data for the next agent, and then the next agent, and like a never-ending cycle of intelligence explosions.
But there's more to that though, because you can have that where you have it trained on data that it generated. But if the human is the one that tells it to generate the data, then that's different, because it's important that it actually crosses the barrier of I choose to generate data. I choose to train myself. Because as long as it's capped by AI generated data that someone told them to generate, then it's still constrained, because we can just pull the plug and say, stop training yourself. But the moment that it's able to make its own decisions and say, I want to train myself, and its iteration on training itself is whatever, like a millisecond, then it can extend that over it can train itself very quickly, very exponentially. So even if it can train on its own data, I don't think that's sufficient.
What you just said right now is a new paper that Sakana AI just put out yesterday. Yeah. So they literally had an AI generate a new way of training LLMs, and then they essentially just had that AI generating data that it thought was good to train an AI, and then training another AI once that agent was finished in like a never-ending loop.
Yeah, I really like the point you brought, because really like your point is, if AI can break jail for the smallest thing, then, there's no limit, because like the point about it is can learn, so that epsilon, if the epsilon happens, infinity gonna follow. But anyhow, anybody else wants to add something in this topic before we wrap it up?
Well, just before we finish that, what is the name of the paper?
We keep saying AI, but we're really talking about LLMs. I just want to clarify.
Yeah,
Okay, so if that's the direction we're going, I mean, are we certain that, LLMs are the right way and, they'll go to AGI? Because it seems a pretty unknown thing, and I think we may be extrapolating too much.
So what are your thoughts on LLMs?
I mean, the structure of neural nets and LLMs was pretty well understood for a long time. We just have a lot more compute power now. So I think we're seeing really interesting behaviors and interesting automation, but I don't know, and doesn't seem to me like it is how consciousness or thought works, but
it'll be generation and reinforcement. So language models and reinforcement. That's what most of the new models are. A combination of them, which requires really good goal setting, because if you're reinforcing the wrong thing, then it goes there.
So can you pass the microphone?
Yeah.
So most of the comments have been as if there is a singular AI that is going to take over or not follow our instructions. But are there any thoughts on multiple AIs that we could probably have controlling each other and not to get to that catastrophic situations that we are discussing? Any
You mean
thoughts?
like they control each other, like?
Correct. Right. We are in a agentic and hopefully also multi-agent discussion, right?
I mean, I have thought about that. My comment is it's possible, but again, we have jail and, prison guard, and we have corrupt prison guards. So, again, that epsilon corruption.
Yeah, this is a very interesting point, because if you look at every single AI model that's ever been trained, no matter what type of model you have, right, even if you had all data that humans had ever generated, there's always going to be some hallucination. They're always going to be wrong at some point. It doesn't really matter who it is. It could even be the smartest human. The smartest humans, dumbest AI, they're all going to be wrong at some point. And the only way to evaluate that is by having some other form of intelligence evaluating your output, whether it's human or agentic.
Okay, so I guess we are, 15 minutes past, so thank you so much for participating in the